Hey, welcome to 2026. This is our first ClearedJobs.Net Military Monday for the year. So we want to welcome everybody. If you are joining us live on LinkedIn, you can throw some comments out there. Let us know who you are, what you're doing, when you're getting out, things like that. Let's first start off by saying who we are. My name is Bob Wheeler. I'm with ClearedJobs.Net. I've been here for a very long time, over 10 years. I'm a Navy veteran. Most of that time was with the Marine Corps, still actually living and hanging out down by Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, still pretty connected to the base and to some of the folks that are down there, besides my regular job here at ClearedJobs.Net. So that's one of the reasons that I'm part of the Military Monday team. And joining me is my co-host, is Miss Sara McMurrough. Do you want to say hello, Sara?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Sara McMurrough. Like Bob said, I've been here also for about 10 years. And, my background, I'm also a veteran, Army National Guard, but the most important part, I think, as far as this presentation is concerned, I'm also a military spouse and with a husband who will be retiring here within about the next year and a half. So, really excited to talk about these things because I'm kind of living that right now. Our family's living it. So, we're learning a lot and, want to be able to pass along what we're finding out.
Yeah, I remember when I got out of the military, Sarah, I described it as like, oh, I'm a tightrope walker at a circus, but by the way, I've never done this before. And also because I have a family, especially, there's no safety net either. So that was the way I felt leading up to getting out of the military. So it can be tough, can it?
It's a little daunting. It's a little daunting. I feel really grateful to be where I am because, I know a lot and, I'm able to kind of make some of these connections and do the things that we're going to talk about today
Yeah.
to help out our
So
family.
Sarah and I, we live in this space between job seekers and recruiters and hiring managers and organizations who hire folks. We specifically focus on people in the cleared spaces. But we live in this space and we see the challenges of people trying to hire folks and we see the challenges of people being job seekers. So we're always happy to help the military folks and talk about this. Usually these types of things last about 30 minutes, these little webinars that we do, the Military Monday. So we'll try to keep it for about that. Like I said, if you're just joining us, if you're on LinkedIn, if you want to throw in the comment section, maybe who you are, let us know what branch you're in, when you're getting out. If you have any specific questions, you can throw it in there. And if we get a chance to talk about those or answer them on live here, we'll do that. But Sarah, there's a couple things we're not going to cover, right? We're not going to cover some of the VA stuff. What else are we not going to cover?
We'll not be covering, pay
Yeah.
or how you're going to do your transition, from the actual unit. We're going to stay on, more on what we're more experts in or what we've been learning.
Yeah, we're not going to help you turn in your SIF gear. We're not going to help you, check out of the armory or something like that. But there are some things that we're going to get to. And the reason we have this little part here is there's the two most common questions that we always get is, when should I start looking for a job? And what should I do with my resume? And those are two very important questions. And we will be answering those, but we're not going to answer them directly. They're going to be part of this whole conversation that's going to be kind of woven into this. So you will get the answers to those questions, but not straight away, because sometimes people kind of jump the gun. So they just start blindly applying, right? That can be a mistake.
They do. And give me 1 second. I'm going to let you talk for a second. I'm going to go do something really quickly. Excuse me.
Gotcha. No worries. So what we are going to talk about here is we're going to talk about, the things, like we said, we are going to get to the resumes. We're going to get to when to start applying for things. But the first thing you want to do is you want to get in the right mindset, and this starts right away. The mindset piece. Welcome back, Sarah. We're
Real life, someone came to the door.
no worries.
Needed to go address that.
We are live here. We are live here. So we're talking about things about getting in the right mindset when you are about to get out, because I think sometimes, especially, people get out at all times. They might have been in for 2 years and they're getting out on a med board. They might have been for 6 or 8 years. But if you've been in for, a long time, 10, 15, 20 or more, your identity kind of becomes the military, and getting in the right mindset can be one of the toughest things to do, can't it?
Right, because a lot of times people are coming right out of high school. They've
Yeah.
never even been part of a civilian world or, outside of the military world. So it's really important to start to figure out how do you kind of weave yourself into that life. Start having the conversations and the networking and A lot of people work in a military space where they're working alongside government civilians or contractors. And that's a great opportunity to start putting yourself in that life, start having conversations and learning about, what it's like on the other side.
Yeah, we use the phrase marinate a lot. A lot of the classes we do, because when you marinate like something for barbecue or whatever, you're soaking in it. It doesn't happen right away. It's not just, you don't just dip it in the sauce, you marinate it. So you want to go ahead and start right away, even if you're not getting out of the military till October of 2026. Step one is start to marinate in the civilian world, so that when you're starting to soak in some of those things and you're doing things, you're talking to civilians to learn, so much that you can learn. There's just so much that you just don't know. And sometimes that can be scary when you're first talking to people, can't it, Sarah?
Right, right. But another way that you can do it is not just talking to people that you work alongside, but what if people who just went through the same
Mm,
thing? They're transitioning and they recently went through retirement or separation. Those are really great people to talk to as well. Reconnecting with them and learning about their transition and also networking with their people.
yeah. Yeah, and I think this is, again, start this now. I mean, if you think you have dumb questions, you'll find that people are kinder to you when you ask dumb questions, when you have a lot of leadway still before you get out. If you come
Right.
up and say, "Hey, I get out of the military late this year, even early next year, and I have these crazy stupid questions," or just they're more likely to help you than if you say, "I just got out of the military yesterday and I have questions." They start to think, "Oh my God, this person just needs a job and I don't have a job for them." People want to help. And if you put less stress on them when you ask early, and you can ask some of those questions. So don't be afraid to start to marinate in that civilian world right away, you know, because you've got a lot more grace and more latitude. And we're going to talk about other things that you can do to break into some of those conversations here in just a second. So, anything else, Sarah, are we missing on marinating and just getting out there? I think we're pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I think so. Just like you said, asking questions early. And because most people aren't going to have a job for you today. If I called you, Bob, and I said, "Hey, I'm retiring tomorrow and I need a job," Bob's probably not going to say, "I have the perfect job for you."
Yeah.
The timing is just not typically that perfect. And you need to take some time to do the networking and learn
Yeah.
first.
So some other things we're going to talk about here is other things you can do during 2026 as you lead up to your transition, and you can use things like a job board. ClearedJobs.Net is one example of a job board. That's what we do. It's where we work at. But a job board is more than just applying for a job. It's more than just that. There's other things that you can do, and we call it career intelligence. And so if you've been in the military and you just don't know some of these things, you can use this to start gathering information. Sarah, there's a difference between searching for jobs on a job board by geography and by skill set, right? I mean, why would we do one or the other, do you think?
Well, I mean, obviously, if you're someone who says, "I'm retiring and I want to move home," wherever home is, then you'll be focused on opportunities there. But you might be someone who's been used to moving for years and years and years, and maybe the location isn't as important, but you're really focused on something that matches what your background is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and another piece of that is that by searching by geography, you can say, okay, I want to go live in Arizona. Just search for no skill sets, wide open. Just look for anything in that area. You can see what kind of companies are there, because just because a company's not hiring right now doesn't mean they won't be hiring a year from now when you're going to get out. But it helps you see just the business landscape of that location. And then when you search by just skill set, but not by location, you can start to see things like, okay, well, I do logistics. What kind of things are important in logistics across the board? Because if you try to hit a home run with these job postings and say, well, I'm going to use a job board because I just want to find warehouse jobs in Phoenix, you might only hit two or three. When you're still at this stage trying to learn, you're still trying to marinate in that civilian industry. So you want to kind of see all those pieces, because you can learn what things you need to do. You can learn what things that you need to fill in the gaps on your resume. And like we've
Right.
said, if you don't know what things mean, this is when you can still ask those stupid questions like, what is
Right.
this certification, right?
Yes, yes, and have time to get said certification and learning about the companies that work in the space that you're interested in. You mentioned logistics. Well, if you're looking at at positions that, require your skills, and you might find a trend. You might find certain companies tend to look for people like you. And those would be the companies you would start following on, a job board or on something like LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's following people like that is a great thing, because again, we're talking here about people who are going to get out sometime in 2026. So these are the pieces they're going to really set you up for success. Let's see here. We've talked about those things. Now on a job board too. Let's talk about this, Sarah. Once you're on a job board, and there's different kinds, but you should, if it's a good job board and it fits your needs, create a profile. And you can do this right away. I mean, we'll use ClearedJobs.Net as an example, because that's where we work. We're proud of it. But I think some of this stuff, no matter what, I mean, creating a complete profile is so important, right, Sarah?
Definitely, definitely. You talked about, searching for jobs by skills. As a job seeker on ClearedJobs.net, you can add those skills that are part of a drop down that the employers can search by. But you can also do something that's new to us and really exciting. You can add when you're available to start working. Your end of active service, you can put the month and year that you're ready to start working. So even if you're, a year out and you want to post your resume now, and don't worry, you can go in, you can make updates to that resume and everything, but it'll show the employers when you can start working, which is super important.
Yeah, there's a lot of fields that are in there. Some, we have places for things like your key skills, but the more complete your profile, the more recruiters can actually use the job board. I mean, job boards, you have to remember, if you're a transitioning service member, job boards make their monies selling access to the companies who are looking for people. So the more filters that they have, the more powerful they're going to be as a tool. And those filters only work when you give them that kind of information about things like your desired locations, your EAS date. Like we said, in our site, you can put your EAS month and year. Those types of things are so important. So create a profile on the job board. Don't wait until you're, right before you get out. You can do that early, and you can keep it updated, and you can see what kind of stuff is going on, and you can still, again, marinating in that civilian industry. So that is a way to use job boards for careers intelligence. Just some highlight pieces there. Sarah, another thing is job fairs, that you can use job fairs. And some people ask us all the time, like, when should I start going? What should I do? Should I go to a job fair? Let's talk about job fairs in general first, just the big picture. I mean, there's different types of job fairs, right?
Right. You can go to a job fair that's focused on the industry you're interested in. It could be for military talent. It could be for cleared talent only. What else? It could be specific to a company. Here I live in the Fort Bragg area, and I've attended a couple with my customers that have set up events here in the area because of recent contract wins, or it could be work they have coming up. So many opportunities in so many different ways to get yourself out there. But Bob mentioned, the asking dumb questions. Well, if you start going to job fairs early and you start learning how to conduct yourself and the questions to ask, you can get some of those maybe not as great questions out of the way earlier. So that
Yeah.
when you really, are 3 months out and it's time to start applying, then you kind of have your ducks in a row and are prepared.
Yeah, and I think if you understand what the focus of the job fair is, you'll go in there better. Like you said, ClearedJobs.net, we're kind of an industry specific. So companies who come to our events are looking for people with a security clearance. Now there might be companies that are looking for financial people and intel people and software developers and lots of other things, but they all want the clearance. That's the thing. There could be other things though. There's veteran specific job fairs that are out there, and those can be good too. But just understand that being a veteran specific job fair, it's not the same as being a specific skill set. It just means they're just looking for veterans. A lot of times at those events, they might be a little more broader. They might have their veteran military recruiters out there that can answer some questions, but they may not be really drilled down on specific job postings at that, because they're kind of doing the big picture. You may end up going to a job fair, see a job fair on post or on base. If you tend to go to those job fairs, those tend to be a lot more focused on specific jobs in that location, and you may not see. Even the big companies may or may not send their big time recruiters. They may actually just be sending like their program manager that's in the area. Now that can be really cool, because if you want to stay in the area, you're talking to people that know the business right there at Fort Bragg or Fort Huachuca or Norfolk Naval Base, wherever. But they may not know much about things outside the area because it's more local. You can have organization stuff, like she said. So there's lots of different job fairs that are out there. And I just think the thing as a transitioning service member, you want to remember is if you know the reason that they're putting it together, you kind of have the right expectations of what you're going to get, because they can all be useful to some degree, you know?
Right. Right. Exactly. I mean, we're not saying don't go to a job fair if, you're not looking at Fort Bragg and the event is at Fort Bragg. You can still go. There's still value. If nothing else, practice. But, more networking, right? Companies oftentimes do have positions or opportunities outside of that area. It's just a matter of making good connections and, requesting further connections, really.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked about those different types of job fairs. We do encourage you. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a little bit as well. But let's go ahead and get into the next piece here, Sarah, which is applying for a job, because this is, like we said, probably the biggest question we ever get is, hey, I'm getting out of the Navy. When should I start applying for a job? Let's go ahead and give them the answer that they're looking for, and then we'll talk more about what it really means. So, Sarah, let's talk about the 90 days and 75% rule of thumb here.
So usually when someone asks, which they do all the time, almost every military job fair I've gone to, and usually we could say pretty comfortably about 90 days out, knowing how this industry works and knowing, especially if there are positions that require clearance, it takes some time to get through those processes. So, 90 days out seems to be a pretty good rule of thumb.
Yeah, and the 75% part there is the rule of thumb is if you meet the qualifications at about 75% or more, it's not a bad thing to apply for that job. But with that caveat of like there can be things that are no kidding requirements. And in our world at ClearedJobs.Net, that can be like security clearances. If it says a polygraph clearance is required, if you meet 99% and that's the only 1% you don't meet, they're not going to be able to waive that. Right, Sarah? That's
Right. Right. Unless it specifically says that you can be submitted for a polygraph or
yeah.
something to that effect. But, so it's important to pay attention to those things within the posting. But either way, at least 75% and definitely the clearance.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of the biggest thing there. And when we say, we'll talk about things like, the resume that you use should be, you're going to hear this. If you haven't already heard it, you're going to hear it a ton. Make sure your resume is targeted towards the job. I like to point out that good advice works for most of the people most of the time. So you could get a ton of advice on resume, Sarah. We see it. It's not always bad. It's just, it is what it is, right?
Different. Yes, and you will get different advice from everyone. And it doesn't mean that it's, bad advice or great advice, but it's, sometimes just a combination of everything that you are hearing and putting it together the way that works best for you. But the number one most important is getting that resume tailored to the position.
Yeah. And
Because as Bob mentioned, go ahead.
no, I was gonna say our advice is diluted, is don't dilute it, distill it, right? We want to really just narrow it down, right?
Exactly, exactly. Make sure that those things that are in that position that you're interested in are in your resume if they are relevant to you and your background.
Yeah. And when we look at the difference between diluting and distilling is sometimes people say, well, I'll just make sure I add the stuff to my resume that is for that job, that job position. It might mean taking stuff out too. And sometimes that might even mean some of the coolest stuff you did in the military, doesn't belong in your resume just because were awarded Soldier of the Year or you did a great deployment someplace but if it doesn't answer the question that job description is asking about, just take it out. Distilling it means that it's not as fluffy. It's just the stuff that matters to that hiring manager and to that recruiter. So if you're going to apply for a job, especially if you're going to blindly apply for a job, it's really going to have to hit those marks, right, Sarah?
Right, exactly. And remember, recruiters, and if you don't know this, recruiters don't have a lot of time, right, to read a 10-page resume.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that what they need is there.
Sarah, you were a recruiter for a long time too. Sometimes recruiters might ask you to kind of tweak your resume, right? They might give you some feedback on it.
They definitely, and it's for a couple of reasons. One, you might just ask a recruiter for some feedback, and if they have, some time, they may give you some feedback. But the other part is if most of the time in this industry, in the government industry and in contracting, your resume has to go to someone else for review. And that means that even though that recruiter had a conversation with you and learned that you have X, Y, and Z certifications that are required, if they are not in your resume or certain parts of the experience required not in your resume, they may ask you to add it if it's part of the discussion, because they'll be sending your resume forward for review to get it, checked off and able to move forward in the process.
And I would think that if a recruiter's asking you to tweak your resume, that's got to be a great sign.
Usually, yeah. I mean, that's because that's a lot of work for recruiters to spend the time, on a call with a job seeker that they don't feel could potentially be a
Yeah.
good fit.
Yeah, what they're saying is that some of these experienced recruiters, especially, they can look at the resume and say, "You've got what it takes here. We just need to fix it." So if they're asking you to do something, that's because they think that, I mean, recruiters' job is to hire people. They're not gonna. You may get some pro bono advice or somebody with a soft spot in their heart that just wants to help you out, but typically, if they're reaching back out to you, it's because they think that you might be at least in the ballpark of being a decent fit, maybe to get to the interview stage and stuff like that. So, speaking of interviews, Sara, let's talk about interviews.
Let's do that.
Yeah. The basics, you got to research the company, right?
Definitely. And that doesn't just mean the website. That means spending some time on their LinkedIn if they have it, and if they have other social media, understanding, not just the basics of the company, but what they're doing now. That stuff is really important too, because you can always loop back and mention, that you saw that they have a recent award, or whatever is related to your position, you can talk about. I mean, there are so many things that you can grab, and it's much easier to make something a conversation and more comfortable if you are prepared for what the discussion will be about.
Yeah,
And that's the research.
this is 100% not the same thing as a sailor to the quarter board. This is not just, answers in a short pat thing. And if you don't know the answer, you just promise to bring them the answer back later at another time type stuff. One of the things that you do want to do is when they ask questions, you want to make sure your answers kind of come back in relation to the job. I think that, especially, the military, it's famous for taking folks and just giving you so many experiences, and you've been so many different places, you've done so many different things. And when they start to ask you questions about maybe your personality, which is not a bad thing, but maybe your leadership style, for example, or how your management style works, or how you had to solve a problem. Again, it kind of goes back to sometimes the coolest thing you did or the hardest thing you did in the military is not what you want to talk about here in the interview stage. You want to make sure that if you're a logistician, that the hardest challenge you faced is a logistical challenge that you faced sometime, not a discipline issue you had with a young airman, that couldn't show up to work on time. And so you had to do mean things to him or something like that. It's got to go back to, it's about relating back to the job. And that goes back to the very beginning we talked about, Sara, marinating in the civilian world and asking stupid questions early so you know what to say, right?
Right, exactly. Understanding the company, and maybe you know someone who already works for that company. That can be part of your
Yeah.
research too.
Yeah, that's a great point. Once you should have questions for them too, Sara. You've said on interviews before, when you were, like I said, when you were a recruiter, job seekers should be prepared when they say, "Do you have questions for us?" You ought to have some, right?
You should, and they could be in a couple of different ways. I mean, it can be, the general questions about benefits and those things, but you should also try to have at least a question about that's more related to the job. Maybe the contract, that if there's a specific contract you'd be working on. Maybe you want to understand the day to day and that type of position. There's so many things that you can ask questions about, but my advice would be to make sure you have a list of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Because what if you only wrote down one or two questions and then you already went through those during the interview and now you're out of questions? So have something so you're not sitting there going, I don't have any questions.
I,
You gotta have questions.
I have seen people say, "You know what? I came in with 5 questions and I've checked them all off." So you know what? That at least shows that you came in prepared, that there were things that you wanted to know more about. And sometimes your questions might get answered in this part of the interview, but it's good to have those. And some questions you can always ask is, what comes next? You should never walk out of an interview saying, "I don't know what's going to happen next." This is a question you're 100% allowed to ask, and you really should ask. You should ask questions like, when should I expect to hear more? How should I expect to hear something? That's not inappropriate to ask, because if you're at an interview stage, Sara, you're otherwise qualified. Like you're in the final running, so they want to be nice to you. And there could be reasons why you're not going to get here right away. What kind of things go on behind the scenes that might affect when you're going to hear something back? Can you share some of that behind the curtain info?
Well, I mean, besides just other conversations that need to happen, but remember I mentioned that resumes often have to go forward to someone else for
Mm.
review. So that's a big thing that needs to happen. And clearances may at this stage be verified. So there are certain things that have to be checked, those boxes that have to be checked before you as the recruiter are able to do anything further. And usually it does have more to do with even the hiring manager, reviewing it and deciding who they want to talk to next. But there are a lot of layers of approval that go on in the government and in contracting side of the house.
Yeah, and when you ask the question of like when can I expect to hear something, it also gives you a good feeling about when you should reach back out to them. If you have an interview today is Monday and they say, hey, we should expect to have some, we'll reply to you by early next week, by Monday of next week. Well, that means that by Tuesday or Wednesday, if you haven't heard anything, you can feel comfortable reaching back out to that recruiter and says, hey, just wanted to check back in. You'd said we might hear something by Monday or Tuesday. Being that it's Wednesday, I just wanted to follow up. You can do that. You're not going to be pushing anybody's buttons. You're not going to be stepping on anybody's toes. But if they say you won't hear anything back till Monday of next week, it would be inappropriate to reach out 2 days later and just check in to see how things are going. That could be a little bit too eager.
Right. Right. Agreed. But one reach that you should do before that is that thank you, right?
Yeah.
Thanking them for that interview or that conversation is definitely appropriate.
Yeah, that should be right away, right? Like the same day as the interview.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that would be my advice. And why are you interested in this position? What makes you a good fit?
Yeah.
And that you look forward to hearing from them, whenever the timeline is that they
If there was
provided.
something especially cool about the interview, I really enjoyed hearing about fill in the blank. That can be a nice way to kind of wrap it up. And but I've seen more than one hiring manager after an interview thing say, "Hey, we interviewed 6 people. How many of them got back?" And you say, "Oh, 4 of them did." Oh, just out of curiosity, which ones? It may not be the thing that guarantees you get hired or doesn't get hired, but it might be the kind of thing that says, you know what, I did kind of like her interview. Like it puts you in a good light, I think.
Right. A little icing on the cake.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good way to say it. So you got the questions, if one of the things we wanted to share, we talked a bit about job fairs, Sarah, ClearedJobs.Net 2026. We've got some stuff coming up. We've got some job fairs coming up in February and March, and these are both for polygraph cleared folks only. So what makes these events unique?
Well, the companies that are attending these events have opportunities that require a polygraph. So if you have a polygraph and you're interested in opportunities in Maryland, then February 5th is a great option for you. If you're interested in Northern Virginia opportunities and you have a polygraph, March 5th might work. If you may consider both, you can attend both.
Yeah.
Remember we said it's not a bad idea to get yourself out there. And if you think, well, gosh, I'd like to go February 5th, but I'm not sure that I'm available, register anyway, because the companies do get access to the resumes beforehand. So they may reach out to you anyway and say, hey, we'd like to see you on February 5th. And you could say, oh, I'm not going to be able to make it because of whatever, but I'd like to set up a call. Something like that. So get your resume out there and make those connections. If you have
part of that career intel. And if you don't have a polygraph, because those are for CI or full scope poly, if you've got a clearance, but it's not at that level, our first event for 2026 for all clearance levels is in Tyson's Corner, Virginia on April the 16th. This is a terrific event for transitioning. We see a lot of transitioning veterans at this event because they've got the clearance. Maybe they're not at the high level, but there's a lot of stuff. And like Sarah said, the companies that are there are looking for people with that level of clearance for those types of positions. Same deal. If you can't make it, we still encourage you to register because your resume will go to all those companies. You can find information about these events and the rest of the events, everything else, ClearedJobs.Net/events, or just go to ClearedJobs.Net and you can see on the homepage where it says career fairs and you can navigate right to that. So that's definitely something that I would encourage you to do. If you happen to swing by some of those events, I'm at almost all of them and Sarah will be at some of them. So if you see us, let us know. But if you don't see us and you want to just reach out to us, you can find us on LinkedIn. I mean, you're already on LinkedIn. If you're watching this, probably you might be watching it on YouTube later on. But we're there on LinkedIn. We're tagged to this. So Sarah, they can find us, right?
Yes, we'd love to connect with you. If you can connect with us just to connect with our networks, that's really important to you. And part of the LinkedIn, like Bob said, you're already step one's done. You're on LinkedIn, right? So now take the time to continue to keep your profile strong, make connections, and start to network as you approach your availability.
Yep. So I am Bob. That is Sara. We right at 30 minutes, Sara McMurrough. So I think we did pretty good, and we'd love to see you guys virtually, or we'd love to see you at some job fairs. But best of luck for a transition to 2026, Sara. I've been there. Sara's about to go through it with her family. We know it can be stressful, but it can also be very rewarding, and we look forward to seeing you guys on the other side. So
Yep.
have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.